first thing Gavin Newsom did is ignite the redistricting war. And when I say that, he wasn't the first mover. That was Texas. That was Greg Abbott. But he's the one who picked up the battle on the other side. And for those who are unaware, when we're talking about redistricting, it's gerrymandering. It's something that Democrats and Republicans, let's be clear, have gerrymandered forever. It's not necessarily something that's unique to one party versus the other. They have both done it. But especially in recent times, it has very much been a unilateral battle where the Republicans are like, I don't give a shit. We are going to do whatever we can to hold on to as much power as humanly possible, while the Democrats are like, hey, guys, we should stop doing this thing. This is dumb, and we're not going to fight back in the same way. And it has led to a country where you can have someone, you can have a Congress that is majority Republican, but doesn't represent the majority of people. And if you're unaware of what gerrymandering is, it's, let's say you have a 50-mile square radius where you have 50% Democrats and 50% Republicans, and you have to divide it into 4 sections. You would think the natural way to do that, it would basically create 2 Republican districts and 2 Democrat districts. But you can draw the maps in ways that put all the Democrats in 1 district and the Republicans in 3 districts, so that now you have a 3-1 instead of a 2-2. And that's what these redistricting initiatives are doing. And what Texas did, and what they successfully accomplished today, is they redistrict Texas in order to gain about 5 seats in Congress. And when we say that, we mean, if you go by previous electoral maps and what the population in these areas voted by, you are going to now have 5 additional seats. If you just replayed 2024, you would have 5 additional seats in the House for coming from Texas. And the first thing, as soon as that was like a thing that was going to happen, Gavin Newsom stepped up and was like, I'm going to redistrict California if you do that, and gain those seats back for the Democrats. Now, this has been divisive among Democrats because you've had people who have been saying, hey, we shouldn't be doing this. This is bad. This is undemocratic, something that I conceptually agree with. And then you have people who say, shit, if they're going to do it and we don't do it, we're just making the problem even worse by not balancing out the scale. And so my question first to you is, where do you side on that? Where do you land on this? Are you someone who's like, hey, we need to fight fire with fire? Or are you someone who's a Kantian ethicist and say, if something's bad once, it's always bad?
I think 2 years ago, Christopher Colt would have probably been more on the latter side of that. But, this second Trump term has been worse in almost every measure than even I imagined it would be. They've been moving more quickly, and as I said before, like, this is evidence that they understand the unpopularity of what they're doing. And I think once you take that into account, once you realize that this is a power play intended to shore up a power base, simply based on the fact that they understand that the American people hate what they're doing, and they're trying to gerrymander the maps in order to remain in power, regardless of the fact that the American people hate what they're doing. And I think once you put it in that perspective, you've got to fight fire in this case, fire with fire in this case, because you have no other alternative. They are doing a naked power grab, about as naked as it could possibly be. They're not even shy about it anymore. They're not trying to couch it. They literally used a deadly flash flood as an excuse to call a special session and then introduce an unprecedented mid-century redistricting. They used the death of children as an excuse to introduce this during a special session. And then they tried to use those children as a shield to accuse Democrats of trying to avoid their responsibility of funding the repairs in this special session. And when you take that all in sum total and you just look at the heinousness of that and the inhumanity of that and the nakedness of that craven power grab, I look at that and go, fuck it. I don't care. I don't care about the rules. I don't care about, all this like ethical stuff. We can't allow that to happen, because if we do, then they're going to move to Ohio. They're going to move to, Missouri. They're going to, they're going to go to all Florida. They're going to go to all these other states. They're going to do the exact same thing because no one was able to stop them now. And all of a sudden, you've literally got the chance that they might get enough members of Congress to then hold a constitutional convention and literally just rewrite the Constitution to favor Donald Trump, who is already probably going to be able to get 2 more conservative Supreme Court justices who are young into the Supreme Court in the next 4 years. Like, we can't lose Congress. We can't lose the Senate, because we've already lost the Supreme Court. We've already lost the White House. And you can see what this Republican majority is allowing already. So, I mean, that's kind of where I fall on it. Like, in the past, yeah, I probably would have been more like, I hate gerrymandering. I hate this redistricting thing. But you have to fight fire with right now. Fire with fire right now, because it's our democracy. It's our future on the line. It's our freedom on the line. You got to fight for that. If you don't, you got to fight like hell, or you're not going to have a country anymore. That's the one thing I agree with Trump on.
Yeah, no, it's the people who, I even see like Nina Turner. I don't know if you know who Nina Turner is, but like she's like against what Gavin Newsom is doing here. I'm just like, if you don't do this, the end result is more gerrymandering to the right. Like if you do not balance that out with your own gerrymandering, because you can negate it, And I have always thought that geographic representation makes no fucking sense to me. I don't know if you agree with this, but like, I don't understand why we have people in the federal government that are supposed to represent a specific area of the country. It's never made sense to me at all whatsoever, because you would want ideally the people in the federal government to be making decisions first and foremost for the good of the country overall. And if they're making decisions for the good of their fucking district that hurt the country overall, I don't understand how that benefits the greater good. Now, I'm never going to win that battle. That battle is basically, we need to write a new constitution or to win it. But it does go to, like, if you do that, if you have just proportional representation, you get rid of gerrymandering entirely. Like you get rid of, instead of having, hey, these states, if you just, everyone in California votes, you have however many districts, I don't know off the top of my head. Let's say there's a fucking 100 districts in California. There isn't. But the top 100 fucking vote getters, down that they're your fucking representatives. And that makes so much more sense to me, because it can't be gerrymandered. It is actual, just like proportional representation to the population. And the only drawback is you don't get that local, that regional representation. But again, I don't even think that's a good thing in the first place. And I haven't really heard a good argument as to why it is, because once again, land doesn't fucking vote. Region, like America should be about the good of all, not the good of the people in your fucking local community. Because I really don't understand, if all men are created equal, why do people who live next to me matter more? Doesn't make any fucking sense to me. But one thing that I do want to point out here is that as much as we must fight back, this is a war that we are not positioned to win. And that's something I don't hear a lot of people on the left talk about, but we really don't have that much firepower outside of California. So essentially, California can negate Texas. Texas was likely to get 5 seats out of this. And California is probably going to get 5 to 6 seats out of this. It's a little bit shakier on the math, but that's probably where they get. So they either negate Texas or, D+1. Unfortunately, after California, there's really not much there's not many other states that Democrats have control over, that they can do this to. Maryland, you might be able to get 1 seat. Other than that, it's pretty shaky. Whereas Republicans, they have control of Ohio, where they can redistrict up to 2 or 3 seats. Indiana, where they can redistrict 1 seat. Missouri, where they can redistrict 1 seat. Florida, 1 to 2. Kansas, 1. Kentucky, 1. North Carolina, maybe 1. We're going to lose this battle if it goes all the way. And I don't think necessarily it goes all the way in every single situation. But, we could be looking at a 4 to 8 seat deficit if everything goes through. I don't really know what to do about that, Chris. But it is just a very unfortunate position where you got to fight back. But God, if they fight all the way, we're in even more trouble. However, kind of what you said earlier, just because that's what the maps were in 2020 and 2024, whatever, doesn't mean that's what the maps are going to be in 2026, doesn't mean what the maps are going to be in 2028. And especially in 2026, when Trump isn't on the ballot, we have consistently seen Republicans fail miserably whenever he isn't on the ballot in this Trump era. And so plus 5 seats might be plus 3 seats. So that's the kind of good and bad of this. But have you looked at what I just said? Because I feel like no one's talking about how this is not a winning battle for us to fight.
Yeah, no, and I'm glad that you brought that up. I haven't had a chance to get granular in the numbers. It would be interesting to go through some of these seats and look at prior elections and try to kind of game out, let's say if we take the races that we've had so far, we'll have a few more this year that we can look at to kind of measure where things are shifting compared to where they were in 2024. I think that when you look at those and you look at those districts, like I said, I'm not fully convinced that Texas can actually get. I'd be surprised if it didn't get 5, but there's a chance, right? Like some of those districts are not super deep red. Like the way they had to redraw the maps, a couple of them are a little pink or maybe even slightly purple. And you get a big enough shift, they might only pick up 3 seats, So it's hard to say precisely how successful, especially since I think most voters, even voters on the right, are against redistricting. Most of them are against this idea of gerrymandering and pushing things. Now, you're going to get enough people on the right who are like, hell yeah, we just need to fight and claw and do whatever we got to do. But I think you're gonna turn some people off. But you're right. I mean, I think Washington theoretically could pick up maybe 2 seats. I've heard Oregon has looked at it. They could maybe pick up a seat. But the problem is, I think in Washington you need something like a 2/3 majority in both chambers in order to pass that, and then that makes a referendum that the voters have to approve. It requires 60%. So you're looking at a pretty high threshold in my state to be able to do that for a pickup of 1 or 2 seats, maybe. So I think that's a lot of the problem. Is a lot of these Democratic states have enacted legislation that makes it harder to gerrymander. Great. The Republican states didn't follow suit. And so we've created the position now where we've created this disadvantage that makes it harder for us to respond because, like in Texas, the legislature just comes and goes, we're doing this. At least California is giving it to the voters and saying, are you okay with this? There's a democratic process there, as there would be in most democratic states. But it puts us at a disadvantage. It puts us at a disadvantage largely because Democrats like to play by the rules. I like to play by the rules. I think everybody should play by the rules. And if you don't play by the rules, now you're risking becoming just like the people. I always say, don't set your compass by your enemy or you'll wind up just as lost as they. We have to be careful about that. So I want us to fight fire with fire, but I also want us to be mindful of the fact that if we push too, I think Republicans aren't doing themselves a favor with this in the minds of voters, and I wonder how much that might impact things. So I'm not as fatalistic about this, I think, as some people are, just because I've seen the numbers and the way they're shifting. But you're right. I mean, it'll be interesting once these maps are done to kind of be able to get in there and play with some numbers and figure out if things shift the way they have in other races since 2024, what that might look like. So I'm not I'm not giving up on the idea of reclaiming the House. We have to, we have to.
Yeah.
There's no, like whatever we do, we have to, like, people can't sit this one out. That's the main message that needs to get that out there. Like, you don't have a choice. Go vote.
Yeah.
No, if you want to make this a moot point, go vote.
Yeah. No, so it's fun because you said that you like to play by the rules sort of thing. And I always say, I get what you're saying. No, this is not necessarily I'm coming at you for saying that, but it is something that has always rubbed me the wrong way when people say that, because what that literally means is not what you're trying to say, because it's an unwritten rule you're talking about. Mm-hmm. It's like when people, the unwritten rules of baseball or whatever, the decorum, like I said earlier, these aren't actual rules. These are unwritten rules that we made up. If we're going by the rules of the game that we're playing, this is totally legal and within the rule set. It is completely and utterly fair game to do. And I've always I've told
break the law,
Exactly.
And I've said their law.
Like when people are like I don't know, a bad sportsmanship in a game, I'm just like, well, if it helps me win, go fuck yourself. What's the point of this? I remember my middle school football team. I played nose guard. I'm a little guy. It'd be shocking that I played nose guard, but I played nose guard, and we lost our first game. We'd been undefeated like my entire football career. It was the first game I ever was about to lose, and they're about to kneel the ball. And I'm lined up, and as soon as they snap the ball, I dive through and try and like steal the ball in between the middle of the snap. And like they basically started a scrum, and like my coaches got mad at me, and they're like, "You can't do that." And I was like, "Why?" And they said, "Because you can't." And I'm like, "Is there a rule that says I can't do that?" And they're like, "No." And I was like, I should play through the whistle, right? I should play every snap as if it matters, right? And they're like, yeah, but it's just not what you do. And they told me, you'll eventually understand this. Still don't fucking understand it. Still don't. And to this day, I stand by that. If it's within the rules, and again, that's a fucking game. That's a game that doesn't fucking matter. This is the most high stakes game in existence. This is thousands, if not millions, of human lives are being fought for here. If you're not willing to do absolutely everything that are within the rules of the game in order to win, you're gambling with people's lives for the sake of your own morals and what you think the rules should be. And it's always rubbed me the wrong way when people talk like that, because I'm like, what's more important to you? Getting the fucking fascists out of office, or your ethical hang-ups with redistricting? Like, it weigh the two together and be honest with me.
Well, and I think, like we said, it's important to note that Texas didn't break the law. It's unethical, but it's not illegal what they did. In California, even more so, is attempting to temporarily change the law in order to allow them to respond. So neither of these states are going against the rules. In one case, they're sort of asking people if it's okay if they change the rules temporarily, and I think it's important that remain our perspective, that you can, I always say, if you don't like the rules, change the rules. Like, if you're the Trump administration and you don't like the way that ICE is required to operate, if you don't like the fact that people have due process, go change it. Get the number of votes that you need to change that law. Because otherwise, if you can't get that number of votes, if you can't change that law, then the odds are either the law shouldn't be changed or people don't want it to be changed. But otherwise, fine. Fair is fair. Fight within the rules, and if you have to skirt the rules or change the rules in order to win and make sure that we can retain our freedom to vote, our freedom to love who we want to love, and marry who we want to marry, and be who we want to be, then if that's what matters, that's fight for that. That's just where I am right now. And I'd say this is like traditionally I'm a rule follower, right? Like, I like the rules. I think the rules are there for a reason. what is it? Chesterton's fence, the rule that says, understand why something exists before you want to take it down.
Mm-hmm.
And, this thing that I keep coming back to with the Trump administration, they're taking things down that they don't understand. They're breaking things because they don't understand them. They've literally created this ethos that, like, if I can't understand that in a single page, then it's worthless. And so they tear down the fence, and now here come the barbarians, which is what we're doing to ourselves, because they're so dumb that they genuinely don't know what they're doing and what levers they're pulling. Or, I mean, maybe some people do, and maybe it's intentional. I'm loath to give intentionality sometimes to a lot of things. I think people are more creatures of instinct than malevolence. There are certainly malevolent players, but I don't think that they have as much control as you think. I think people tend to follow pleasure and profit. And those are the motives that lead us to where we are, But that having been said, like, yeah, we got to fight, and we got to fight dirty. But we can't lose our soul, and we can't lose our conscience, and we can't lose our affinity for truth and justice and what's right. And I think if we can keep those as our North Star, you'll also win people over, because I do think that people value that. I think it's important. You can't necessarily be, Kamala Harris wanted to be the adult in the room. And I love that. That's valuable to me. That's an asset for me as a voter, but clearly not for millions of my fellow Americans. And so at some point we need to say, these are the candidates I like, but these are the candidates that can win.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, at the end of the day, what matters to me is the things that you fucking do, the policies that you pass, the laws that you pass, the things that you implement. Are they going to improve people's lives?
Yeah.
I don't give a shit how much of an asshole, how much of a dickhead, how much of a whatever you are. As long as you do the things that improve people's lives, you can call my mother a whore, and I'm still gonna fucking vote for you. It's not the tactics that are bad. It's the outcomes that are bad. Do whatever fucking tactics you need to win. Just go fucking win, because we can't have these guys winning. And I agree with you, by the way, about
I completely agree. Like, our LGBTQ brothers and sisters are at risk. There's a lot of people right now whose ability to be who they want to be, whose ability to live authentically as themselves, is in serious risk. And we need to understand, like, I'm not at risk. I'm a middle-aged, straight, white dude. I could put my head down. I could just power through the next several years, and no one would say boo to me. Right? But I am out here because it's not about just me. It's not about just my survival. It's about the country. It's about the people in the country. And it's about making sure that the least of these are valued and cared for, and, and that we don't give ourselves over to this mind of that my neighbor is my enemy. I don't know if you saw that. What's the guy's name? Andrew Tate, that letter to the editor that was going around. And I've read that probably 10 times now. I just love it. I love every bit of what he said, because he's absolutely right. We need to ask ourselves the most important question. Who is this government for? Who do they serve? I don't see them, like, all the gold filigree covering everything in the Oval Office doesn't serve me. A 90,000 square foot ballroom connected to the White House doesn't serve me. Who is being served by paving over the rose garden at the White House and putting a patio there? Does that serve me? Like, we need to seriously ask ourselves that question. People need to really just man up and look at what this guy is doing and ask yourself. I probably 5 Trump supporting people in my life that I still talk to. And I've asked each and every one of them, every month since Trump became president, can you name me one thing that has materially improved about your life that you can directly point to a policy he has implemented and thank for it? Every month, since he got into office again, not once has one of them been able to respond with something. We're 7 months in, John. Like, you should be able at this point, if you're a Trump supporter, to say, my groceries have gone down, my gas is cheaper, my heating bill is less expensive, the illegal immigrant who raped my mother was deported, whatever. Like, you should be able to point to something by now that he's done, because he made a lot of promises about in 24 hours he was going to bring down the cost of groceries and they were going to drill baby drill. He said within what? I have to go back and look. He said within 18 months he could have heating bills and gas half what they were. Well, they're only
going to end the war in Ukraine on day one.
Out of time. Yes. It's like, at some point you have to be able to kind of pull back. I had a conversation, like probably an 8-hour conversation with a Trump supporting friend recently. And it was so frustrating, because like so many times he'd look at me with this sort of blank expression and just shrug. And I'd be like, what did you just do right there? What did you just, like, why did you just shrug? You don't have an answer? That doesn't bother you? Do you lack curiosity at all? Like, do you not want to know what documents he took when he left the first time? And why he was trying to hide them? That doesn't bother you? Do you not want to know about the hush money payment to Stormy Daniels? Do you not want to know about the rape of E. Jean Carroll? Do you not want to know about his tax fraud in New York? Do you not want, like, does none of this concern you? I've been sending so many people, he's improved he's $3.2 billion richer today than he was when he took office. $3.2 billion, most of that through a worthless crypto meme coin that exists solely as a way for people to launder money to him. And I sent that to my dad and I said, I want you to just read the story and just replace Donald Trump's name with Joe Biden and then tell me your reaction. Crickets. It's like, at some point you've got to be able to step back and look at things holistically and stop siloing everything and stop translating for him. Like I was asking my friend about tariffs and he went on this long spiel and I looked at him at the end of it and I said, you just gave me a 10 times more cogent breakdown of tariffs and how they work than the man you voted for has been able to do. Why is that? And he's just like, oh, it's like you were able to articulate a way in which tariffs might work. Now, that's not what they're doing, but you at least laid out a case. Far better than the person you voted for and still support. That ought to stand for something. And it's just this, I just think he's got good instincts. I just think he's onto something. I said, for how long? How long do I give you in order for us to start seeing these things? Nothing.
Here's
like, and
here's the thing, Chris.
Through this too.
Yeah, it's not like you say, are you not curious? Do you not want to know? And the answer is unambiguously yes. They don't want to.
They don't want to know.
And I say this often. And again, as much as I enjoy disparaging Trump supporters, what I'm about to say isn't even specifically disparaging of only Trump supporters. We all do this, where we have certain assumptions about life, about the world, that are pillars in our mind. And they hold a lot of things. And if you take that pillar away, so much weight comes crumbling down upon you that you will defend that pillar against to unreasonable degrees. And again, like, we all do this. Maybe we have a family member or a parent or a sibling who's a bad fucking person, just a bad person, and you just refuse to believe it. Because if my dad is a bad person, all of these things, all these lessons that I taught that are good, that have defined me as a person, it's being supported by that, and a lot of people have that, regardless of political spectrum. We have it a lot, like look at Democrats. like Biden, for example, he wasn't with it. Yeah, I think we can all agree that he shouldn't have been fucking president. And it probably was dangerous in some regards. And a lot of Democrats still to this day won't admit that. Like they will sit there and tell you square to your face, Joe Biden was as sharp as a tack. There was no age deterioration of his mind, just totally fine, because it's holding up so much of their belief system, and they can't do it, and so many people do that. And when you have that, it's impervious to facts and it's impervious to new information, and that's how fascism takes hold. They put more and more and more weight on these pillars. They start with little things. They start with, hey, these immigrants are coming over and raping and murdering, and it's like, oh, I can believe that, I can say that. And then suddenly they're eating the cats and dogs. Suddenly they're responsible for all the crime in America. Suddenly they're doing all this. Oh, we have to send the fucking masked federal agents into workplaces, into churches, into schools to kidnap them and take them away. And like, once you, okay, I'm on board with that. Oh fuck, if I admit that I was wrong about any of this shit, that makes me look like a Nazi. And they can't fucking do that. And so
so you'll choose to be a Nazi rather than look like a Nazi.
Exactly. No, that is so entirely the case, because genuinely, this is, again, not just a Republican, not just a Democrat or anything. We would rather look like good people to other people than be good people. Again, not everyone is like that, but across the board in humanity, that is a defining principle. And like, again, you see that just in basic fucking tests where, you go into, I'm sure people have heard about this, like psychological tests people have run, where you set up a room and you have one person go into it. Everyone else is a test subject. You ring a bell, everyone stands up. And eventually that test subject just follows along with the fucking crowd. And they get replaced until everyone is a test subject. Ring the bell, everyone's standing up. And it's because we just have this psychological need to be seen as part of the group by the people around us, even if it's totally absurd and we have no understanding as to why people are standing up when they ring that fucking bell. And that applies to so many things in life. It applies to so many things in politics. And it very much explains why your dad, when he sees that article, it bounces off of him. Because if he were to admit the truth of that to himself, so much weight would come crumbling down on his head.
Yeah. The other day, I can't remember how it came up, but I sent him some. So as a Christian, right now he's being very much like, well, what really matters is your personal salvation, and don't be so, you don't need to be so concerned about politics and all that. And so I pulled up, because we have a chat, I can search the history. So I went back to 2022 and found a post where he was talking about, like, I was asking him whether he supported pastors preaching politics from the pulpit. And his response was, well, why wouldn't they? Why wouldn't you want to speak out against the evil in the Biden administration? And I showed that to him. And I said, this was you 2.5 years ago. Did your mind change? Because now you're telling me, oh, we don't need to be so interested in politics. Just, follow Jesus and God's in control. Like, he was in control back then too, right? Nothing. It's just like all of a sudden just disappears. And I told him, I don't want to get into the weeds on my dad. That's a whole thing. But I just said, all I've ever asked of I have never asked any of my Republican friends or family to follow me to the Democrat side. I've never asked them to become a liberal. I've only ever asked that they apply the same skeptical lens that they do for every other politician to Donald Trump. That they not allow him to get away with things that they wouldn't allow somebody else to do. And every single one of them will tell you, oh, that's fair. And then you show them something and they go, well, but Biden, and I'm like, you don't have a defense. But Biden is not a defense. It's an excuse. It's a deflection. It's an effort to avoid taking responsibility for what your guy did. If I grant you everything, if I grant you that Joe Biden was as corrupt as they come, I'd be okay with that. Like, if it was true and you could prove it, fine, lock him up. I don't care. Mm-hmm. Because I'm not beholden. I mean, what am I going to do with all my Biden merch? You know, like, no. Like I don't have the flag, I don't have the decals, I don't have the hat, the coat, the shirt, whatever, the mug. I don't have any of that stuff because I don't worship politicians, because that's stupid. Because putting men on pedestals or women on pedestals never works out. They're always going to let you down. Even the best politician, the person you love the most, even a Jasmine Crockett or a AOC or a Pete Buttigieg or whatever, are at some point going to say something that you don't like. At some point, they're going to let you down on some topic, because we never see 100% eye to eye with anybody, you know. But I can take those things and I can say, yeah, I don't like that, but it's better than this, or it's a step in the right direction, right? Like I said earlier, I don't like these bridge things. I think we need to be more, we need to embrace progressivism and just own it, and just say, with our full chest, as confident as we can, say, this is the way, right? The way we're trying to go back to a way that we've already tried and it didn't work. Stop that. The definition of insanity is doing the same thing twice and expecting different results, right? Done with that. But at the same time, like, I look at that pragmatically and go, you know, I need to be able to apply that skeptical lens, you know. And so let's say I grant you everything Biden did was terrible and evil and he's the most corrupt president in history. Fine. What does that say about your guy? What does that have to do with your guy? They're two separate human beings living two separate lives. What Biden allegedly did has nothing to do with what Trump is currently doing. So stop it. Stop that. It's not productive, you know? It's like you just want to pick them up and live. It is. It's like, I was telling my wife the other day, it's very much like a puzzle that I just can't solve. I think that's what fascinates me so much. It's always this thing of like, I hear you saying this, and then I see you supporting this, and those things don't line up. And I don't understand that. Explain it to me. I'm too old to, I don't want to do politics anymore. I'm too busy. Like, I'm busy too, but it's the future of our democracy at stake. So maybe bone up and man up and have the conversation, because it's important. But they always want to run away.
To circle that back to the beginning of the episode, like that's one of the reasons I feel like conservatives, when they stop being conservatives, often go way farther left and go, because we also fucking hate Joe Biden and Hillary Clinton. We are not fans of them. Like, when they're like, but what about Biden? We're like, yeah, fuck him too, bro. Yeah. Come over here. Come to the populist left. We don't like them very much either. We criticize them all the time. Everything you're saying about them, I mean, not everything, but a lot of the things we'll agree with you on. Let's make it better. And that's
great thing. And he deserves plenty of credit for the good things that he did.
Yeah.
You know, like, take what Chris Pratt said the other day. Like, Chris Pratt's an idiot, but you know, there is something in that is a kernel of truth, and that is that we should never allow ourselves to come to a point where we hate somebody so much that we can't even acknowledge when they've done something good. But what he missed in that was, like, that's exactly what the right does with Biden. Like, the Infrastructure Act was a good thing. The CHIPS Act was a good thing. The Inflation Reduction Act, mostly a good thing. Like, there are a lot of good things that Joe Biden accomplished through those largely bipartisan bills. Like, he's an old-fashioned politician. He worked across the aisle, and he gave some and he got some, and that's how it used to get done. He was able to get stuff done in a very divided Washington, D.C., and he deserves some credit for that. What Chris Pratt is entirely missing, though, is that the right will never, ever, they would rather cut off their own genitalia, like fully just go eunuch, than ever give Joe Biden credit for anything. And then they have the temerity to come out and say, well, don't get to where you hate somebody so much like Trump that you can never admit when he's done something good. I tell you what, when he does something good, I'll give him credit for it. Now, he could make that easier by doing something good. Let's start there. Do something good and then test us. But it's just like this. But, I say all that to say there is a kernel of truth there that we should never become so hateful of somebody that if they do something good, we can't give them some credit for it. Like during his first term, Trump did a couple of things that I actually liked. He was able to bring down the cost of some prescription drugs, in a rather bass-backwards, ineffective way, but he got some of that done. The vaccine for COVID, he deserves a lot of credit for that, which he has now completely done away with, but he deserves some credit for that. Fine, I'll give it to him. If he can get a deal done that allows Ukraine to be at peace and keeps, fine, do it. I'm happy to admit that if you can solve that war, great. I don't necessarily hate the fact that he's at least trying to get people in the same room. Like that's a good thing, right? People should be talking. But then you have to add on to that the whole, Putin's puppet thing and the fact that he keeps parroting Russian talking points. Like, again, I wrote something about this on my Substack recently about all the things that NEGA says they want to do that I actually agree with, but then all the ways they fuck it up.
Yeah.
Because what they say isn't what they actually do.
Yeah, there are two undeniably good things that Donald Trump did that if you can't admit this, you're just being partisan. One, as you said, Operation Warp Speed, it's what we fucking needed. We got it on time. We got it as fast as we possibly could. And you can argue that he wasn't incredibly involved in that. I don't give a shit. He didn't fuck it up. He got that done.
He got out of the way and let him do it.
Exactly. And the second thing is he gave all the assholes a shiny red hat so we can identify them more easily. That was probably the best thing that he ever did. Thank you guys for watching. Me and Chris are going to get into it again on a future episode. So make sure you like and subscribe so you know when that is. And if you guys want to hear more of Chris, Chris, how about you tell people where they can find you?
Yeah, you find me at Personality of Cult on Threads. You'll also find me on Substack, and I'm working on the YouTube channel, so I'll post that on Threads as soon as we get it done. But we're gonna do our best to copy John's formula.
Awesome. Well, thank you guys again for being here. TJ will be back with us next week on Tuesday at 6:30 for our Q&A show. Make sure to be there. Until then, have a good day, people.